Hello, my name is Father Lawrence Jagfeld. I am a Franciscan friar of Sacred Heart Province, headquartered in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm also the administrator of CUSA, an apostolate of persons with chronic illness and/or disability. The Gospel for this particular Sunday, the 30th Sunday in Ordinary Time, the B cycle of the lectionary, follows hard upon the Gospels of the last two Sundays. You might remember that 2 Sundays ago we heard the story of the man who was seeking to follow Jesus, but who was unable to part with his great wealth. And then you will remember perhaps the story of James and John, who wanted the glory, but not necessarily the path to that glory. Today we hear a rather fascinating story about a blind man sitting at the side of the road. As Jesus was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a sizable crowd, Bartimaeus, a blind man, the son of Timaeus, sat by the roadside begging. On hearing that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, "Jesus, Son of David, have pity on me." And many rebuked him, telling him to be silent. But he kept calling out all the more, "Son of David, have pity on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take courage, get up, Jesus is calling you." He threw aside his cloak, sprang up, and came to Jesus. Jesus said to him in reply, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man replied to him, "Master, I want to see." Jesus told him, "Go your way, your faith has saved you." Immediately he received his sight and followed him on the way. The Gospel for this particular Sunday and the Gospel passages for the last 2 Sundays are really all of a piece. They are all about the cost of discipleship. You might remember that the young man that approached Jesus was unable to follow because of his wealth. James and John were following Jesus, but they were thinking about themselves. Jesus is leaving Jericho. Now, if you know anything about the geography of Jerusalem and the surrounding countryside, you know that Jericho sits at the very bottom of Mount Zion. When you leave Jericho, you are walking toward Jerusalem. You are going up the mountain toward Jerusalem. So without saying so in so many words, Mark tells us that Jesus is nearing the end of his journey. For we know that Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem, where he will give up his life for us. And on his way, he meets this blind man. A blind man who doesn't really completely understand who Jesus is. We can tell that by the title that he uses to address Jesus, Jesus, Son of David. But at the same time, he does realize that Jesus could be something more in his life, could be the source of being able to see again. So even though others try to dissuade him, even though others try to shut him up, he persists. And Jesus answers his persistence. All of a sudden, the crowd is on his side. "Get up, Jesus is calling you." But these are the very same people that tried to shut him up to begin with. When he gets to Jesus, Jesus poses a question. "What would you have me do for you?" This question might seem a little strange. For obviously this man is blind. And obviously, too, Jesus has cured blind people before. It should be fairly obvious, Jesus, this man wants you to heal him. But it is also something that is very true when we say that in the Synoptic Gospels, in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus never acts as the initiator. Jesus never takes the initiative. He always waits for someone to ask him to do something. The Gospel of John is a little bit different, but in these three Synoptic Gospels, Jesus waits to be asked, and the man says that he would like to see. Why does Jesus not take the initiative? Because the gift of sight will mean that this man will have to change his life. He will no longer be able to use his blindness as an excuse for not helping others in need. He will be expected to be a servant himself, just as the disciples are expected to be servants. Jesus heals the man. Immediately, and upon receiving his sight, the gospel tells us that he followed him on the way. These are code words. If you know anything about the origins of Christianity, you know that before it was called Christianity, it was called the Way. Bartimaeus followed Jesus on the way. He went with Jesus to Jerusalem. Now, we don't know what happened to him in Jerusalem, but we do know this much. This man who has been gifted with sight from Jesus realizes his obligation, and because of his faith in Jesus, he follows him. Very, very important words. He follows him on the way. He has become one of Jesus' disciples, and in so doing, he has become a servant leader. So this story about the blind man on the roadside of Jericho is really the story that ties up into a very neat little package the stories that we have heard on the two preceding Sundays. This story puts into action the words that Jesus has been preaching to the young man and to his disciples. It is no longer a matter of just words. It is a matter of the example of one who has come to faith, one who has been given the sight and is able to see what it is his to do. For more information about CUSA, please visit our website at www.cuson.org.